Chippendale, a tiny inner-city suburb with a long history of colourful characters and seedy activities. Since early European settlement, Chippo has been the setting for many a sordid tale.
One of the first land grants here was to a man called William Chippendale, and that's who the area's taken its name from. And Chippendale was involved in a murder very soon after he got here. He, in fact, was growing potatoes. And further up, closer to town, was the barracks where some of the convicts who worked in the brickyards were housed overnight. And they'd come out, it was a moonlit night, to steal some of the potatoes. He came out because he heard a noise, saw them, and managed to shoot one of them. So the name of the whole area is taken from a person who was involved in a fairly unfortunate incident. But of course they were convicts and he wasn't, so he got off.
In 2008, a group of Sydney artists were invited to create their impressions of Chippendale's more unsavoury elements.
We're in the NG Art Gallery, and below us is Mission Restaurant Bar. Mission, the building, was built in 1818. It was the original Sydney City Mission, and it was used as a mission for people to come seek refuge. Given our building's past, it made sense for us to present an exhibition that reflected the history of our area, even if some of the stories are a touch risque.
I think it's for some people it is a bit overwhelming to actually walk into this place. Just by the very nature of the equipment, it's quite confronting for some people. I had a client who came in a couple of weeks ago and said he'd been wanting to come here for 3 years. 3 years? I said, well, what was holding you back? And he said, I don't know. I was terrified of, what might happen. And when I said, gosh, this is a professional establishment. This isn't like, dialing someone up on the net and not knowing what you're getting. This is, you don't have to be frightened. That's a great thing about a place like this, is that, we are professional mistresses. We take very seriously what we do here. This is not about, inflicting pain on people who don't want pain inflicted on them. This is about indulging people in their fetishes and fantasies and making that as fabulous for them as possible,
Years ago, when I was at art school, Madame Lash was one of the artist models there, and we had many occasions drawing her, and I believe some of these girls actually said they were a protege of Madame Lash, of Gretel Pinninger it was. But they were interesting times when you're young and you're at art school, and so it wasn't something that I'd been unfamiliar with. I guess because my work's always been fairly figurative and very much based around the figure itself. That it's just an extension of that, insofar even just the outfits that the girls wear, it accentuates their form and their femaleness, really. So it's sort of really right up my street. Just that whole image of the girls in those sort of costumes is just fantastic. Just such an intimate space, which was interesting. As I said, the colour and the lack of light, but I was also taken by the attitude of the girls there, how open and unpretentious they were, and just totally uninhibited, and quite happy to welcome me to come in and into their world.
There were lots of stories about Billy Fawcett, the rat catcher who was employed by the City Council around this area, and people used to say that he was so fond of his job that he had no fear of these rats. He would put his hand into the retaining wall that was just over the road there on Broadway and pull them out, get them in his bucket.
I actually called him a rat hunter because I've got French heritage. I like to name my paintings in French, and it didn't translate that well in French, which translates as le chasseur de rats. The idea of the guy with his hand in the hole, you know, and you know what is behind that hole. What is he trying to actually do? I mean, if you didn't actually have the label on the bottom of the canvas, you really wouldn't know what he was doing, really.
If you look at the early maps of this area, it's very, very obvious that it's a stopping off point for the drays coming in from the west, from Parramatta and Camden and places beyond. And there are rows and rows of pubs and public houses, and wherever you had that, you had the creature comforts like prostitution and so on.
When I was on South Sydney Council, we were the first council to bring down a development control plan to sort of regulate brothels in the area. The suburb's still full of prostitutes and brothels, but hopefully they're run a little bit better now. Hopefully the workers are a little bit better protected now that they're legal and not illegal, and hopefully a lot of the darker elements of the pimping and stuff have been forced out of it. I'm sure there's still, you know, illegal ones around. I'm sure there's still kickbacks to cops and things like that. Certainly, I remember as a kid, the cops were just regarded as one of the biggest and best armed gangs in the area, and they certainly were corrupt, as the Royal Commission found out.
I was invited in about '97 to take over a squat in Chippendale.
Squatting is a big part of the history of this suburb, as it is in all the inner city. The RTA had great plans for Chippendale in terms of road widening, and so they owned a lot of the houses down here on Abercrombie Street. And of course the RTA were terrible landlords, and often these places were left empty and squatters got in there, and good luck to them.
I went to a lawyer and told him what I thought I should be able to do, and he'd never heard of a process called adverse title, or indeed possessory title. And, only a month ago I got the news that it was now mine, after I've been in there 11 years.
Police Commissioner Jim Lees has ordered an investigation into the circumstances surrounding the death of Warren Lanfranchi. Lanfranchi was shot after he allegedly pointed a gun at a member of the police armed hold-up squad in Chippendale 10 days ago.
Warren Lanfranchi was an interesting character. He was young, not particularly bright, I don't think, good-looking, fit as a fiddle, and had absolutely no concept of what was right and wrong. He was a cowboy, and I think it was mid-afternoon, I think, when most of the local residents here, who have all since long gone, and this street was a mix of light industrial and some old last gasp Sydney tenement housing. And it was in this laneway that Warren and Roger's discussion ended rather abruptly when, my memory serves me, Roger reckons that Warren pulled a gun, and Roger then, fearing for his life, shot him in self-defence. And that was the end of the Warren Lanfranchi career in crime.
I once heard Roger Rogerson talk at one of those circuit talking things with Mark Jacko Jackson and Chopper Reid in Adelaide, and when he discussed the Lanfranchi murder, it was just eerie how this sort of decorated cop could become so corrupt. More importantly, the association of things like I like that whole notion of Roger the Dodger. I like that whole idea of Dodge City. Dodge City is a 1939 film with Errol Flynn, and in Dodge City they hire a sheriff, or they bring a sheriff to town to clean up the baddies, if you like. So, that kind of happened in this case, if you like.
If a crime had happened, there's a reasonable chance that if it happened in the city, then the perpetrators would be lurking around Chippendale through to Darlinghurst somewhere. As a young copper, if you ever had to go and find somebody, or you're just looking for someone to arrest, basically, you could have a wander around areas like this, and it'd be a fair chance of finding someone who was wanted for something. It was a colourful area.